The scream of the mill's whistle split the humid Texas air as Teresa Durant wiped the sweat from her brow, her muscles aching from another grueling 12-hour shift at the lumber mill just outside Fort Worth. It was August of 1881, and the heat made everything harder, from hauling planks to keeping her focus sharp around the dangerous machinery that had already claimed 2 fingers from old Pete Johnson just last month. She'd been working at the mill for 3 months now, ever since her father had died from fever and left her and her younger brother Patrick to fend for themselves. At 22, Teresa had thought she might find work as a seamstress or perhaps in one of the town's boarding houses, but those positions paid half what the mill offered, and Patrick needed medicine for his weak lungs. So she'd cut her auburn hair shorter for safety, wore her oldest clothes, and showed up at dawn every morning ready to prove she could work as hard as any man. Most of the workers had accepted her after the first few weeks, seeing she wasn't afraid of hard labor and didn't complain about splinters or the constant sawdust that coated everything. But Howard Fletcher, the foreman, had made it clear from day one that he didn't think women belonged in his mill. Teresa grabbed her tin pail and joined the line of workers shuffling toward the payment office. It was Friday, the day they all got their weekly wages. She mentally calculated what she was owed. 12 hours a day for 6 days came to 72 hours at 25 cents an hour. $18. It was enough to pay the rent on their small room above the general store, buy food for the week, and put a little aside for Patrick's next doctor visit. The line moved slowly as Fletcher sat behind a wooden desk, counting out coins and bills from a lockbox. When it was finally Teresa's turn, she stepped forward and held out her hand. Fletcher barely looked at her as he counted out bills and coins. Durant, $12. Teresa's stomach dropped. "Excuse me, Mr. Fletcher, but I worked 72 hours this week, same as everyone else." "That should be $18. Fletcher's eyes, small and mean in his fleshy face, finally met hers. "You took extra breaks. Water breaks, rest breaks. That's 6 hours I'm deducting. $12 is what you're getting." Heat flooded Teresa's face, but it wasn't from the August sun. "I took the same breaks as everyone else. 10 minutes at noon and 10 minutes at 3, same as always." "Are you calling me a liar, girl?" Fletcher's voice rose, drawing attention from the men still in line behind her. "I'm saying there's been a mistake," Teresa said, fighting to keep her voice steady even as her hands trembled. "I need what I earned. My brother is sick and not my problem." Fletcher shoved the $12 toward her. "Take it or leave it. Either way, step aside. You're holding up the line." Teresa stood frozen, staring at the money that was $6 short of what she needed. $6 might not seem like much to Fletcher, but it was the difference between Patrick getting his medicine or going without. It was the difference between eating properly or going hungry. "Please," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I worked every hour, you know I did. Tom and Billy can vouch for me, I never took extra breaks." Tom Wilson, who was standing behind her in line, cleared his throat. "She's right, Fletcher. Teresa works straight through, same as the rest of us." Fletcher's face turned an ugly shade of red. "You want to lose your job too, Wilson, because I can arrange that real quick." Tom fell silent, and Teresa felt her last hope crumble. She wanted to argue more, wanted to demand what was rightfully hers, but she could see in Fletcher's eyes that he was hoping for an excuse to fire her entirely. If she lost this job, she and Patrick would be out on the street within a week. With shaking hands, she took the $12 and stepped aside, blinking back angry tears. She wouldn't give Fletcher the satisfaction of seeing her cry. The walk back into Fort Worth proper took 30 minutes, and Teresa used every step of it to try to figure out what she was going to do. She could skip buying meat this week, make do with beans and cornbread. Maybe she could find some mending work in the evenings to make up the difference. But even as she made these plans, anger burned in her chest like a hot coal. She'd earned that money. She'd worked for it with her own sweat and aching muscles, and Fletcher had stolen it from her as surely as if he'd robbed her on the street. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice the man until she nearly walked straight into him. "Whoa there," a deep voice said, and large hands steadied her shoulders. Teresa looked up and up, past a broad chest covered in worn buckskin, past shoulders that seemed as wide as an axe handle, to a face that was all hard angles softened slightly by gray-green eyes and shoulder-length dark hair that looked like it had been cut with a hunting knife. "Sorry," she mumbled, stepping back quickly. "I wasn't watching where I was going." The man studied her with an intensity that made her aware of how she must look, covered in sawdust and sweat, her short hair wild and her eyes probably red from fighting tears. He was tall, probably 6'3" or more, with arms thick with muscle visible even through his shirt. Everything about him spoke of strength and power, from his scarred knuckles to the knife at his belt. "You all right, miss?" he asked, and there was something in his voice that suggested he actually wanted to know, not just making polite conversation. "I'm fine," Teresa said automatically. Then, because she was tired and angry and the kindness in his eyes was almost harder to bear than Fletcher's cruelty, she added, "Or I will be. Thank you for asking." She moved to step around him, but he shifted slightly, not blocking her path exactly but not letting her pass either. "Name's Adam Garrett," he said. "I've been up in the mountains these past few months trapping, just came into town for supplies. Don't mean to pry, but you look like someone just kicked your dog." Despite everything, Teresa felt a small smile tug at her lips. Close enough. "Someone just stole $6 from me, and there's not a thing I can do about it." Adam's eyes narrowed. "Stealing's a crime. Sheriff's office is right down the street." Teresa shook her head. "It wasn't that kind of stealing. My foreman docked my pay, claimed I took extra breaks when I didn't. But it's his word against mine, and he's the one with the power." She saw something change in Adam's face, a hardening around his eyes that made him look dangerous despite his concern moments before. "That's the worst kind of stealing," he said quietly. "Taking from someone who can't fight back." "Where do you work?" "Harrison's Mill, about 2 miles north of here. But really, there's nothing to be done. I need the job too much to make trouble." Teresa clutched her inadequate wages tighter. "I should go. My brother will be wondering where I am." "Thank you again for your concern, Mr. Garrett." This time when she moved to leave, Adam let her pass, but she could feel his eyes on her back as she walked away. The room Teresa and Patrick rented was small and hot, tucked under the eaves of the general store with a window that faced west and let in all the afternoon sun. Patrick was lying on his narrow bed when she came in, his thin chest rising and falling with the slightly wheezy sound that never quite went away. "Teresa," he said, sitting up with a smile that made him look younger than his 16 years. "How was work?" "Same as always," Teresa lied, forcing brightness into her voice. She set her pail down and went to feel his forehead, relieved to find it cool. "How are you feeling? Any better?" "Some better," Patrick said, though his smile faded as he studied her face. "What happened?" Teresa should have known she couldn't hide anything from her brother. They'd been through too much together, had relied on each other for too long. She sat on the edge of his bed and told him about Fletcher docking her pay. Patrick's hands clenched into fists. "That's not right. He can't just steal from you like that." "He can, and he did," Teresa said tiredly, "but we'll manage, we always do." "You shouldn't have to manage," Patrick said. "You should get what you earned." Teresa squeezed his shoulder. "Don't worry about it, I'll figure something out." Right now, I need to get to the store before it closes and buy what we need for the week." She left Patrick resting and went downstairs to the general store. Mr. Chen, who ran the place, was a kind man who had given them a fair price on the room and never complained when Patrick's coughing kept him up at night. Teresa moved through the store carefully, calculating every purchase: flour, beans, a small amount of lard, some coffee. She lingered over the dried apples, knowing Patrick loved them, but they were a luxury she couldn't afford this week. The medicine he needed would take most of what was left after rent and food. She was at the counter, watching Mr. Chen tally up her purchases, when the door opened behind her with a jingle of bells. She didn't turn around, focused on counting out her coins. "I'll take those apples there," a familiar deep voice said. "And whatever the lady's buying, put it on my account." Teresa spun around to find Adam Garrett standing behind her, his arms full of supplies of his own. "Mr. Garrett, I can't already done," Adam said, nodding to Mr. Chen, who was looking between them with interest. "Consider it a welcome to town gift. Or an apology for almost running you down in the street earlier." "You didn't almost run me down. I almost ran into you," Teresa protested. "And I can pay for my own things. Didn't say you couldn't." Adam set his own supplies on the counter. "But seems to me someone did you wrong today, and I don't like seeing that stand. This isn't charity, miss. This is just one person helping another, the way folks are supposed to." Teresa felt her throat tighten. She wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her pride, but the truth was she needed help. And there was nothing mocking in Adam's expression, nothing that suggested he was doing this to make her feel small. He looked like he genuinely wanted to help, like it bothered him that she'd been wronged. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That's very kind. But I can't accept charity without at least knowing why you're offering it." Adam's expression softened. "Fair enough. Truth is, I spent 10 years working for other men before I went out on my own. Worked ranches, lumber camps, mines. I've seen more than my share of foremen and bosses who think they can treat their workers however they like. It always stuck in my craw, especially when they went after folks who couldn't fight back. So when I see it happening, I try to help if I can." "Well, I appreciate it," Teresa said. She hesitated, then added, "I'm Teresa Durant, and you've just bought a week's worth of food for me and my brother." "Patrick," Mr. Chen supplied helpfully. "Good boy, very polite." Adam smiled, and it transformed his face from hard and dangerous to something warmer. "Pleased to meet you properly, Miss Durant, and I'm glad to help your brother too." "How old is he?" 16, Teresa said. "He's been sick with lung trouble for the past year. The doctor says the air in the city doesn't help, but we can't exactly afford to move to the country." "The mountains would probably do him good," Adam said thoughtfully. "Clean air, quiet, but I suppose that's not practical right now." "Not very," Teresa agreed. She watched as Mr. Chen packaged up her supplies, adding the dried apples on top with a wink. "Mr. Garrett, I insist on paying you back. It might take me a few weeks, but I always pay my debts." "If it makes you feel better, sure," Adam said easily. "Though there's no rush. Money's not something I need much of up in the mountains." They walked out of the store together, Adam carrying both his supplies and hers despite her protests. The evening air was slightly cooler than the afternoon had been, and the main street of Fort Worth was busy with people finishing their business before dark. "Where are you staying?" Teresa asked as they climbed the outside stairs to her room. "At the boarding house." "Haven't decided yet," Adam said. "Might just camp outside of town. I'm used to sleeping under the stars." They reached her door, and Teresa took her packages from him, acutely aware of how small the doorway suddenly seemed with Adam standing in front of it. "Thank you again. For everything. You've been very kind to a stranger. Like I said, just folks helping folks." Adam hesitated, then asked, "This Foreman of yours, Fletcher, you said his name was—" "Howard Fletcher," Teresa confirmed. "Why, just curious." Adam's expression was unreadable. "You be careful around him, Miss Durant. Men who steal from women workers are usually the type to cause other kinds of trouble too." A chill ran down Teresa's spine despite the warm evening. "I can handle Fletcher." "I'm sure you can," Adam said. "But if you can't, you know where to find me. I'll be in town for a few days at least." After Adam left, Teresa brought the supplies inside and found Patrick sitting at their small table, looking much more alert than he had earlier. His eyes went wide at the sight of the food. "How did you afford all that?" he asked. Teresa told him about Adam as she put things away. Patrick listened intently, his expression growing thoughtful. "Sounds like a good man," he said when she finished. "He does seem decent," Teresa agreed. "Though I don't know anything about him really. He could be an outlaw for all I know." "He's not an outlaw," Patrick said with the certainty of youth. "Outlaws don't help people, they take from them." "Like Fletcher," Teresa said bitterly. Patrick's expression darkened. "You should let that mountain man help you get your money back. He looks like someone who could make Fletcher listen." "Patrick, I can't ask a stranger to fight my battles." "Why not? He offered, didn't he?" Teresa didn't have a good answer for that. She busied herself making dinner, a better meal than she'd planned thanks to Adam's generosity. As she worked, she found her thoughts drifting back to the tall mountain man with his kind eyes and protective manner. There had been something about him, something solid and trustworthy that she hadn't felt around many men. Most of the workers at the mill were decent enough, but they kept their distance, unwilling to risk Fletcher's wrath by being too friendly with the woman he clearly wanted gone. But Adam Garrett hadn't seemed afraid of anyone. The next morning was Saturday, which meant another long shift at the mill. Teresa woke before dawn, kissed Patrick's forehead, and made the long walk north in the growing light. The mill whistle blew at 6, and she was at her station by 5 past, ready to begin another day of hauling lumber and trying to stay out of Fletcher's way. The morning passed in the usual blur of noise and sawdust. Teresa worked alongside Tom Wilson and Billy Martinez, loading finished planks onto wagons bound for Fort Worth and beyond. They didn't talk much over the sound of the saws, but she appreciated their steady presence. At noon, when the whistle blew for the brief break, Teresa was wiping her hands on her trousers when she saw Fletcher striding toward her, his face already red and angry. "Durant," he barked, "you're wanted at the office." Teresa's stomach clenched. "What for?" "Just get over there. Now." She followed Fletcher across the mill yard, her mind racing through possible reasons for being called to the office. Had she done something wrong? Was she being fired? Her hands were shaking by the time they reached the small wooden structure that served as the mill's administrative building. But when Fletcher opened the door, Teresa stopped short. Adam Garrett was standing inside, looking completely at ease despite the cramped space. Mr. Harrison, the mill's owner, was there too, a silver-haired man in his 60s who Teresa had only seen a handful of times. "Miss Durant," Mr. Harrison said, gesturing her inside. "Come in, please. Mr. Garrett here has brought something to my attention." Teresa stepped inside, shooting Adam a questioning look. He met her eyes calmly, and she saw something there that told her to trust him. "It seems there was an error in your payment yesterday," Mr. Harrison continued. "Mr. Fletcher, would you like to explain?" Fletcher's face went from red to purple. "There was no error. The girl took extra breaks. I docked her accordingly." "That's interesting," Adam said, his voice mild but with steel underneath. "Because I spoke to several of your workers last night and this morning. Tom Wilson, Billy Martinez, Pete Johnson, and Frank Cooper all said Miss Durant works the same hours as everyone else and takes the same breaks." They also said this isn't the first time you've docked her pay unfairly. You had no right, Fletcher started, but Mr. Harrison held up a hand. Mr. Fletcher, these are serious accusations. If you've been cheating my workers, especially targeting Miss Durant because she's a woman, that's grounds for immediate dismissal. She doesn't belong here, Fletcher burst out. Women have no place in a lumber mill. She's a distraction and a liability. I've been trying to get rid of her since she started. The silence that followed was profound. Teresa stared at Fletcher, shocked that he'd actually admitted it out loud. Mr. Harrison's expression had gone from stern to furious. "Is that so?" he said quietly. "Then let me make something very clear, Mr. Fletcher. I own this mill and I decide who works here. Miss Durant has been nothing but professional and hardworking from what I've observed. You, on the other hand, have just confessed to stealing from one of my employees." "I didn't steal. You took wages she earned. That's theft." Mr. Harrison turned to Teresa. "Miss Durant, how much were you shorted yesterday?" $6, sir," Teresa said, finding her voice. "I worked 72 hours at 25 cents an hour." Mr. Harrison opened the lockbox on the desk and counted out bills. "Here's your $6, plus an additional 6 as an apology for how you've been treated. And effective immediately, your wage is raised to 30 cents an hour." Teresa's eyes widened. "Sir, that's not necessary. It absolutely is," Mr. Harrison said firmly. "You've put up with Fletcher's harassment for 3 months and still shown up every day ready to work. That deserves recognition." He turned back to Fletcher. "As for you, you're fired. Get your things and be off my property within the hour." Fletcher's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. "You can't do this. I've run this mill for 5 years. And apparently used that position to steal from and harass your workers. I absolutely can do this, and I am. Leave now, or I'll have the sheriff remove you." Fletcher shot Teresa a look of pure hatred before storming out of the office. The door slammed behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. "Thank you, sir," Teresa said to Mr. Harrison, clutching the $12 in her hands. "I didn't know Mr. Garrett was going to—" "Don't thank me. Thank Mr. Garrett." Mr. Harrison nodded to Adam. "He came to see me first thing this morning with witness statements and a very compelling argument about fair treatment of workers. I'm grateful he brought this to my attention." Adam shrugged his broad shoulders. "Just did what was right." "Will you be looking for work yourself, Mr. Garrett?" Mr. Harrison asked. "I'll be needing a new foreman, and you seem like a man who knows how to lead fairly." "Appreciate the offer," Adam said. "But I'm not much for staying in one place. I prefer the mountains to town life." "Well, if you change your mind, the position is yours." Mr. Harrison turned back to Teresa. "Miss Durant, take the rest of the day off, with pay. I imagine you could use a break after dealing with Fletcher's nonsense." Teresa walked out of the office in a daze, Adam beside her. She made it about 20 feet before her legs went shaky and she had to sit down on a stack of lumber. Adam sat beside her, the wood creaking under his weight. "You did that," Teresa said. "It wasn't a question." "I did," Adam confirmed. "Hope you're not angry about it." "Angry?" Teresa looked at him incredulously. "You just got me my wages back, got Fletcher fired, and got me a raise. Why would I be angry?" "Some folks don't like others fighting their battles." "Well, I'm not one of them, not when someone's fighting for what's right." Teresa looked down at the money in her hands, then back at Adam. "How did you get witness statements?" "Went to the boarding house where most of the mill workers stay last night and this morning. Talked to the men who worked near you. They all said the same thing. Fletcher had it out for you and had been stealing from you since you started." Adam's jaw tightened. "One of them said Fletcher tried it with another woman worker last year. She quit after 2 weeks of his harassment." Teresa felt sick. "I didn't know that." "No reason you would. She left town entirely." Adam met her eyes. You stood up to him longer than anyone. That takes courage. Or stupidity. I needed the job too much to walk away. Nothing stupid about taking care of your family, Adam said firmly, but you shouldn't have had to put up with theft to do it. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the mill work continue around them. Teresa was aware of curious glances from the other workers, but she didn't care. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe properly. "Why did you do this?" she asked quietly. "You don't know me. You had no reason to get involved." Adam was quiet for a long moment. "My mother worked in a textile mill back east," he finally said. "Worked herself to death, literally. 12, 14-hour days for pennies, with a foreman who was worse than Fletcher. She died when I was 15, and I swore that if I ever saw someone in a position to help workers being cheated, I'd do it. So I did." Teresa felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm sorry about your mother. It was a long time ago." Adam stood, offering her his hand. "Come on. Let me walk you back to town. You should celebrate with your brother." Teresa took his hand, feeling the calluses and strength in it as he pulled her to her feet. She didn't let go immediately, looking up at him with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Thank you," she said. "Truly. You've given me more than just money. You've given me back my dignity." Something shifted in Adam's eyes, a warmth that made Teresa's breath catch. "You never lost that, Miss Durant. Fletcher tried to take it, but dignity isn't something someone can steal. You kept yours the whole time." They walked back to Fort Worth together, talking more easily now. Adam told her about his life in the mountains, about trapping beaver and bear, about the silence and beauty of the high country. Teresa told him about her father, about how he'd been a schoolteacher back in Virginia before coming west for a fresh start, about how his death had left them scrambling to survive. "You could go back east," Adam suggested. "To your family." Teresa shook her head. "My father was estranged from his family. They didn't approve of him marrying my mother. She was Irish, fresh off the boat, and they thought he was marrying beneath him. When she died giving birth to Patrick, his family refused to help. So we're on our own out here, but at least we're making our own way." "That's a hard road," Adam said quietly. "It is," Teresa agreed, "but it's ours." They reached the general store and Teresa paused at the bottom of the stairs. "Would you like to come up and meet Patrick? I know he'd like to thank you too." Adam hesitated, and Teresa found herself hoping he'd say yes. She wasn't ready for him to leave yet, though she couldn't quite articulate why. "I'd like that," Adam said finally, and Teresa felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the stairs she was climbing. Patrick was sitting at the table, working on some arithmetic problems from an old schoolbook. He looked up when they entered, his eyes going wide at the sight of Adam filling the doorway. "Patrick, this is Adam Garrett," Teresa said. "He's the man I told you about. Adam, this is my brother Patrick." "Pleased to meet you, sir," Patrick said, standing and offering his hand. His voice was slightly wheezy, but his handshake was firm. Adam shook his hand seriously, treating the boy like a man. "Good to meet you, Patrick. Your sister speaks highly of you." "She got her money back, didn't she?" Patrick asked eagerly. "I can see it in her face." Teresa laughed and told Patrick the whole story. His eyes grew wider and wider as she spoke, and when she finished, he turned to Adam with something like hero worship on his face. "That's amazing," Patrick breathed. "You stood up to the foreman and the owner and got Fletcher fired." "Your sister stood up to Fletcher first," Adam corrected gently. "I just made sure she got what she'd earned. She did the hard part, working under him all those months." Teresa felt warmth spread through her chest at Adam's words. She busied herself making coffee, suddenly very aware of how small their room was, how shabby their furniture. But when she glanced at Adam, he didn't seem to notice or care. He was looking at one of Patrick's drawings, a sketch of a horse that hung on the wall. You draw this? Adam asked. Patrick nodded shyly. I like to draw, mostly animals and landscapes, things I see from the window or remember from when we lived in the country. It's good, Adam said, and he sounded like he meant it. You've got talent. Patrick beamed, and Teresa felt something soften in her chest. It had been a long time since anyone had shown interest in Patrick's drawings. Most people just saw him as the sick boy, the burden that kept Teresa working so hard. They spent the afternoon talking, the conversation flowing easily. Adam told stories about the mountains, about encounters with bears and mountain lions, about finding perfect beaver streams and making camp under stars so bright they looked like diamonds on velvet. Patrick hung on every word, asking questions and laughing at the funnier stories. Teresa found herself watching Adam more than was probably proper. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way his hands moved when he talked, broad and capable. She noticed how gentle he was with Patrick, never condescending or impatient with the boy's enthusiasm. And she noticed how safe she felt with him in the room, like nothing bad could happen while he was there. As the sun began to set, Adam finally stood to leave. I should let you folks have your evening. Thank you for the coffee, Miss Durant. Thank you for everything, Teresa said, walking him to the door. On impulse, she added, You're welcome to visit again while you're in town, I mean. I'd like that, Adam said, and the way he looked at her made Teresa's heart beat faster. How about tomorrow? I could bring some fresh meat. I'm planning to hunt in the morning, and venison's always better shared. That sounds wonderful, Teresa said, meaning it. After Adam left, Patrick immediately turned to her with a knowing look. You like him? He's a good man, Teresa said, trying to sound casual. No, I mean you like him, Patrick insisted. The way women like men in the stories. Teresa felt her cheeks heat. Patrick Durant, that's not appropriate conversation. But it's true, Patrick grinned, looking more animated than he had in weeks. And he likes you too, I could tell. He kept looking at you when you weren't watching. Teresa wanted to deny it, but she couldn't quite bring herself to lie. It doesn't matter. He lives in the mountains. He's only in town for a few days. So make those days count, Patrick said with the wisdom of someone who'd faced his own mortality. Life's too short not to take chances on good things. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Teresa thought about Adam Garrett. She thought about his strength and kindness, about the way he'd stood up for her without expecting anything in return. She thought about his stories of the mountains and wondered what it would be like to see them herself. Most of all, she thought about the way her heart had lifted when he'd said he'd visit again tomorrow. Patrick was right. She did like him, more than liked him if she was honest with herself, and the thought both thrilled and terrified her. Sunday dawned clear and warm, another scorching August day in Texas. Teresa used her unexpected day off to clean their room thoroughly, change the sheets, and wash their clothes in the basin. She told herself she was just taking advantage of the free time, but when she caught herself checking her reflection in their small mirror for the third time, she had to admit she was hoping to look nice for Adam. He arrived at mid-morning, carrying a burlap sack that smelled of fresh meat. Got a young buck this morning, he said, handing her the sack. Already cleaned and butchered. Should last you and Patrick a good while if you keep it cool. Adam, this is too much, Teresa protested, though her mouth was already watering at the thought of fresh venison. They usually could only afford the cheapest cuts of beef, full of gristle and fat. It's nothing, Adam assured her. I'll get more meat than I need for myself anyway. Makes me happy to share it. Patrick came bouncing over, his color better than usual. Can we cook some now, please, Teresa? Teresa laughed at his eagerness. I suppose we could have an early dinner. Adam, will you stay and eat with us? I'd be honored, Adam said. They spent the next hour preparing the meal together. Teresa was surprised at how comfortable it felt, working alongside Adam in their small kitchen. He was handy with a knife, cutting vegetables with quick, sure strokes, and he didn't seem bothered by the close quarters. Patrick chattered away, telling Adam about his dreams of one day being well enough to work at a ranch with horses. "The mountains would help your lungs," Adam said, echoing his comment from before. "Clean air, no smoke or dust. I've seen men with lung trouble improve considerably after spending time in high country." "We can't afford to travel," Teresa said practically, "and certainly can't afford to move." "What if someone offered you a place?" Adam asked carefully. "Temporarily, I mean, just for Patrick's health." Teresa paused in her work, looking at him. "What do you mean?" "I have a cabin up in the mountains, about 3 days' ride northwest of here. It's nothing fancy, but it's solid and there's good hunting and fishing nearby. You and Patrick could stay there for a spell. Give the boys' lungs a chance to heal." Teresa stared at him. "Adam, we can't. That's your home." "It's a cabin I use in the summer," Adam corrected. "I move around a lot, have a few different places I stay depending on the season. The summer cabin will sit empty once I move to my fall hunting grounds anyway. Might as well have someone using it." "But we'd be taking advantage. You'd be doing me a favor," Adam interrupted gently. "The cabin needs airing out, and having someone there would keep animals from moving in. Besides, I'd worry less about you and Patrick here in town, with Fletcher still around and angry about losing his job." That gave Teresa pause. She hadn't thought about Fletcher coming back for revenge, but it was a real possibility. The man had seemed genuinely enraged when he was fired. "Could I really get better?" Patrick asked quietly. "In the mountains." "Can't promise anything," Adam said honestly. "But I've known 3 men with lung troubles who improved up there. The air's thin but clean, and there's something about being away from the dust and smoke that seems to help." Teresa looked at her brother's hopeful face and felt her resistance crumbling. Patrick's health had been declining slowly but steadily for months. The doctor had said he needed better conditions, but she'd had no way to provide them. Now, Adam was offering a solution like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I'd need to work," Teresa said. "I can't just live off your charity." "Fair enough," Adam said. "The cabin and surrounding area could use some maintenance. Roof needs patching, garden's overgrown, place could use a general cleaning. You do that work and we'll call it even." It was a generous offer, far more generous than the work warranted. But Teresa could see in Adam's eyes that this mattered to him, that he genuinely wanted to help. "Can we really go, Teresa?" Patrick asked. "To the mountains?" Teresa looked at her brother, then at Adam, then back at Patrick. "We can try it," she said finally. "For a few weeks at least. If it helps your lungs, we'll figure out something more permanent." Patrick let out a whoop of joy, and even Adam smiled, that warm expression that transformed his face. "Good. We can leave tomorrow if you want. Sooner Patrick gets up there, the better." "Tomorrow?" Teresa felt dizzy at how fast everything was moving. "But I need to give notice at the mill and we need to pack, and I'll go with you to the mill tomorrow morning," Adam said calmly. "Mr. Harrison seems like a reasonable man. I'm sure he'll understand. As for packing, how much do you really need? Clothes, personal items, whatever food you want to bring. The cabin has basic supplies already." Teresa took a breath, trying to steady herself. Everything was changing so fast, but maybe that was good. Maybe she'd been stuck for too long, grinding away at the mill and barely surviving. Maybe it was time to take a chance. "All right," she said. "We'll do it. We'll go to the mountains." That night, after Adam had left with plans to return at dawn, Teresa and Patrick packed their few belongings. They didn't have much. Clothes, a few books, Patrick's drawing materials, Teresa's sewing kit. Looking at their possessions laid out, Teresa felt both sad and liberated. They'd had so little, but they'd made it work. And now they were going to try something new. Are you scared? Patrick asked as they worked. A little, Teresa admitted. But mostly I'm hopeful. If the mountains can help you get better, it'll all be worth it. What about Adam? Patrick asked slyly. Are you hopeful about him too? Teresa threw a sock at him, but she was smiling. Go to sleep, you troublemaker. But lying in bed that night, she let herself think about Adam, about his strength and kindness, about the way he looked at her like she mattered, about spending weeks or maybe months living in a cabin he owned, getting to know him better. The thought made her feel things she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. She'd been so focused on survival that she'd forgotten what it was like to look forward to something, to feel excited about the future. Adam arrived at dawn as promised, leading 3 horses, his own large bay gelding and 2 smaller horses he'd apparently purchased or borrowed. Figured you'd need mounts, he said. These are gentle, good for inexperienced riders. Teresa had ridden as a child, but it had been years. Still, as Adam helped her onto one of the horses, she found the old skills coming back. Patrick needed more help, his thin frame making mounting difficult, but Adam was patient, adjusting the stirrups and showing him how to hold the reins. They rode to the mill first, arriving as the early shift was starting. Mr. Harrison was already in his office, and he listened thoughtfully as Teresa explained she needed to leave. I'm sorry to lose you, he said sincerely, but your brother's health comes first. The job will be here if you come back, and if you need a reference for work elsewhere, you let me know. Thank you, sir, Teresa said, touched by his kindness. You've been very fair. With that settled, they rode out of Fort Worth heading northwest. The town fell away behind them, replaced by rolling prairie that gradually gave way to rougher country. Adam rode in front, clearly comfortable in the saddle, while Teresa and Patrick followed. They stopped frequently to rest, Adam always finding shade and water for the horses and checking that Patrick was managing all right. How far is it really? Teresa asked during one of these stops. About 90 miles, Adam said. 3 days if we take it easy, which we will. No sense pushing hard and wearing Patrick out. The first day passed pleasantly enough. The weather was hot but not unbearable, and there was something freeing about being on the open trail. Patrick was more animated than Teresa had seen him in months, constantly pointing out birds and asking Adam questions about the landscape. They camped that night by a small creek. Adam set up a simple camp with practiced efficiency, building a fire and catching fish from the creek for their dinner. Teresa helped where she could, but mostly she watched Adam work, marveling at how capable he was. Everything he did looked effortless, from hobbling the horses to cooking the fish to setting out bedrolls. You've done this a lot, she said as they ate. Most of my adult life, Adam confirmed. Took to the mountains when I was 18, never really left except for supply runs. Don't you get lonely? Patrick asked. Adam considered the question. Sometimes, he admitted, but there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I like the solitude most of the time. Though, he glanced at Teresa, I'm finding I like the company too. Teresa felt warmth spread through her at his words and the look that accompanied them. After dinner, Adam insisted she and Patrick take the bedrolls while he slept by the fire. Teresa protested, but Adam was firm. I'm used to rough sleeping, he said, and I want to make sure Patrick stays comfortable. His health's the priority. Lying in her bedroll under the vast Texas sky, Teresa listened to the sounds of the night, crickets chirping, the creek burbling, the horses shifting occasionally. And underneath it all, the steady breathing of Adam Garrett keeping watch. She felt safer than she had in years. The second day was harder. The terrain grew rougher as they left the prairie behind, heading into hill country. Patrick started coughing more, the exertion of riding taking its toll. Adam noticed immediately, slowing their pace and stopping more frequently. "We can rest here for the day if you need," Adam offered during one stop. "No rush to get there." "I'm fine," Patrick insisted, though his face was pale. "I want to keep going." They compromised, taking a long midday rest before continuing at a gentle pace. By the time they made camp that evening, Patrick was exhausted but still in good spirits. Adam made a rich broth with some of the dried meat and vegetables they'd brought, insisting Patrick drink it all. "You're going to spoil him," Teresa said, but she was grateful for Adam's care. "Good," Adam said. "Boy deserves some spoiling." That night, sitting by the fire after Patrick had fallen asleep, Teresa found herself talking to Adam more openly than she had with anyone in years. She told him about her dreams before her father died, about wanting to be a teacher like him, about feeling trapped by circumstances but refusing to give up. "You're strong," Adam said quietly. "Stronger than most men I know. Takes real courage to keep going when life keeps kicking you down." "I don't feel strong," Teresa admitted. "Most days I feel like I'm barely holding on." "That's what strength is," Adam said. "Not never being afraid or tired. It's keeping going even when you are." Teresa looked at him across the fire, seeing the way the flames cast shadows on his strong features. "You're a good man, Adam Garrett. I'm glad we met." "So am I," Adam said, and the intensity in his eyes made Teresa's breath catch. They reached the cabin late on the third day. It was nestled in a small valley between two hills, surrounded by pine trees and with a creek running nearby. The cabin itself was solid timber construction with a stone chimney and a covered porch. It was bigger than Teresa had expected, with what looked like 2 rooms and real glass windows. "It's beautiful," Teresa breathed as they dismounted. "It'll do," Adam said, but she could see he was pleased by her reaction. He helped Patrick down, and the boy immediately started exploring, his fatigue forgotten in his excitement. Inside, the cabin was simple but well made. The main room had a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, and a cooking area. A ladder led to a loft, and a door opened to a smaller bedroom. "You and Patrick take the bedroom," Adam said. "I'll sleep in the loft." "Adam, this is your cabin," Teresa protested. "We can't kick you out of your own bedroom." "You're not kicking me out, I'm offering," Adam said firmly. "The loft's plenty comfortable, and you and Patrick need the privacy." Over the next few days, they settled into a routine. Adam showed Teresa how to maintain the cabin, where the best fishing spots were, how to preserve meat for the coming winter. Patrick's coughing started to ease within the first week, the clean mountain air clearly helping. Color returned to his cheeks, and he began eating more. Teresa found herself falling into an easy rhythm with Adam. They worked together during the day, repairing the cabin roof and clearing the overgrown garden. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch while Patrick drew, talking about everything and nothing. Adam told her more about his past, about growing up poor in Pennsylvania, about losing his mother and then his father to a mining accident, about coming west to escape the memories and finding peace in the mountains. Teresa told him about her own life, about the hopes she'd had and the reality she'd faced. And slowly, as the days passed, she realized she was falling in love with Adam Garrett. It wasn't just his strength or his kindness, though those were part of it. It was the way he made her feel safe and valued, the way he treated Patrick like family, the way he looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, even when she was covered in dirt from working in the garden. One evening, about 3 weeks into their stay, Patrick went to bed early, tired from a day of exploring the surrounding forest. Teresa and Adam sat on the porch as usual, but there was a different quality to the silence between them now, an awareness that had been building for weeks. "Patrick's doing so much better," Teresa said softly. I can't thank you enough for this. Seeing him healthy is thanks enough, Adam said. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "What will you do when it's time to leave, go back to Fort Worth?" Teresa's heart sank at the thought. "I suppose we'll have to. I need to work and Patrick will need to stay somewhere while I do." "What if you didn't have to go back?" Adam asked. He turned to face her, and in the fading light his eyes were intense. "What if you stayed here? Adam, we can't live off your charity forever." "I'm not talking about charity." Adam took a breath and Teresa realized he was nervous. "I'm talking about something more permanent. Teresa, these past few weeks have been the best of my life. Having you and Patrick here, having someone to talk to and work alongside, having you." He paused. "I care about you, more than care about you, I'm in love with you." Teresa's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Adam." "I know it's fast," Adam continued, "and I know I'm just a mountain man without much to offer. But I have this cabin and I have my skills and I could provide for you and Patrick. I'd treat you right, Teresa. I'd spend every day trying to make you happy, so I'm asking, would you consider staying? Would you consider being my wife?" Teresa felt tears spring to her eyes. "You love me." "With everything I have," Adam said simply. "I love you too," Teresa said, the words tumbling out. "I've been trying not to because I knew I'd have to leave, but I do. I love you, Adam." Adam's face transformed with joy. He stood and pulled Teresa to her feet, his large hands gentle on her arms. "Is that a yes? Will you marry me?" "Yes," Teresa said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you." Adam pulled her into his arms and Teresa felt like she'd finally come home. She'd spent so long fighting to survive, to keep going, to protect Patrick. But now she could rest. Now she could be happy. When Adam kissed her, it was gentle and reverent, like she was something precious. Teresa kissed him back, pouring all her love and hope and relief into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "I promise I'll take care of you," he said. "Both of you. You'll never have to worry about being cheated or mistreated again." "I know," Teresa said. "I trust you completely." They were married a week later in Fort Worth, with Mr. Harrison and Mr. Chen as witnesses and Patrick beaming beside them. It was a simple ceremony, but Teresa didn't need anything fancy. All she needed was Adam's steady presence and the promise in his eyes. They spent their wedding night at the boarding house in town, Patrick staying with Mr. Chen so they could have privacy. Adam was gentle and patient, treating Teresa like she was made of glass. She'd been nervous, but Adam made her feel safe and cherished, and by the end of the night she understood what all the fuss about marriage was about. The next morning they bought supplies and headed back to the cabin. Their cabin now, Teresa thought with a thrill. Her home. Life in the mountains was harder than in town in some ways, but better in every way that mattered. Teresa learned to hunt and fish, to preserve food for winter, to read the weather and the signs of animals. Patrick continued to improve, his lungs growing stronger in the clean air. He spent his days drawing and helping with chores, and for the first time since their father's death, he seemed truly happy. Adam was everything Teresa could have hoped for in a husband. He was protective without being controlling, strong without being harsh. He listened to her opinions and treated her as an equal partner. And at night, when they lay in their bed with Patrick asleep in the loft above them, he held her close and told her stories until she fell asleep. Winter came, and with it, snow that blanketed the mountains in white. Adam taught Teresa and Patrick to track animals in the snow, to ice fish, to stay warm in the brutal cold. They were snowed in for weeks at a time, but Teresa didn't mind. She had her family, and that was all she needed. Spring brought new life to the mountains. The creek flooded with snowmelt, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and Teresa discovered she was pregnant. A baby. Adam said when she told him, his face going through a dozen emotions in seconds. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be," Teresa said. "Are you happy?" Adam swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed. "Happy? I'm the happiest man alive. We're having a baby." Patrick was equally thrilled at the prospect of being an uncle. He immediately started drawing pictures of babies and planning all the things he'd teach his nephew or niece. The pregnancy was easier than Teresa had feared. Adam was attentive without being overbearing, and the physical work of mountain life kept her strong. She continued her normal activities well into her third trimester, only slowing down in the final weeks. Adam rode to Fort Worth to fetch a midwife when Teresa's time came. Mrs. Johnson was an experienced woman who delivered half the babies in the county. She took one look at Teresa and pronounced her healthy and strong. "First babies can take a while," she warned. "Don't you worry if it's slow going." But Teresa's labor, while painful, progressed steadily. Adam stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. When their son was finally born just after dawn, wailing lustily and red-faced, Adam had tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect," Adam said, cradling the baby with surprising gentleness for such large hands. "You did so well, Teresa. He's absolutely perfect." They named him Marcus, after Teresa's father. He had Adam's dark hair and Teresa's blue eyes, and from the moment he was born, he was the center of their world. Patrick was smitten with his nephew, spending hours drawing pictures of the baby and helping Teresa with diaper changes and feedings. "He's so small," Patrick marveled. "Was I ever this small?" "Smaller," Teresa said. "You were a tiny thing when you were born, but look at you now, almost 17 and healthy as a horse." It was true. Patrick had grown taller and filled out, his chronic cough almost completely gone. The doctor in Fort Worth, when they'd gone for a checkup, had pronounced it a miracle. Teresa knew it was no miracle. It was clean air, good food, and the love of family. Life settled into a new rhythm. Marcus grew from a tiny baby into a chubby, happy infant who loved being carried around the cabin on his father's shoulders. Adam proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching Marcus to walk and talk and eventually to ride. 2 years after Marcus was born, Teresa had their second child, a daughter they named Sarah. She had Teresa's auburn hair and Adam's gray-green eyes, and she was as fearless as her father from the day she could crawl. Patrick, now 19 and fully grown, had started talking about moving to town and apprenticing with a carpenter. "I want to build things," he said. "Houses and furniture. Beautiful things that last." "You should," Teresa encouraged him. "You've got talent and you're healthy now. It's time you lived your own life." "I'll come back and visit all the time," Patrick promised. "And you'll have to bring the little ones to town so I can see them." "Of course we will," Adam said. "Your family, you'll always be welcome here and we'll always come see you." Patrick left for Fort Worth that spring, and while Teresa missed him, she was proud to see him pursuing his dreams. He wrote regularly, telling them about his apprenticeship and eventually about the girl he was courting, a blacksmith's daughter named Amy. Meanwhile, Teresa and Adam's family continued to grow. A third child, a boy named Daniel, was born when Sarah was 2. Then came another daughter, Elizabeth, 2 years after that. The cabin had to be expanded twice to accommodate everyone, but Adam seemed to enjoy the building projects, and the children loved having more space to play. Through it all, Teresa never forgot where she'd come from. The exhaustion and fear of those days working at the mill, the helplessness she'd felt when Fletcher stole her wages, the desperation of trying to care for Patrick alone. She'd come so far from that woman, but she remembered her. So when a young woman showed up at their door one day, thin and exhausted and asking for work, Teresa took her in without question. Mary was running from an abusive employer in Fort Worth, and she needed safety and a chance to heal. "You can stay as long as you need," Teresa told her. "We've all needed help at some point." Mary stayed for 6 months, helping with the children and the household work while she regained her strength. When she finally left, it was to take a teaching position in a neighboring town, something Teresa had helped her prepare for. "You saved my life," Mary said when she left. "I'll never forget your kindness." "Someone saved mine once," Teresa said. "I'm just passing it along." The years passed in a blur of children and seasons of hard work and joy. Patrick married his Amy and moved back to Fort Worth, where he built beautiful furniture and eventually opened his own shop. He and Amy had 4 children of their own, and the cousins loved visiting each other. The town kids amazed by the freedom of the mountains, the mountain kids fascinated by the bustle of Fort Worth. Teresa and Adam's children grew strong and capable in the mountains. Marcus became a guide, leading hunting parties and teaching others to live off the land. Sarah married a rancher and moved south, where she ran her own cattle operation with fierce efficiency. Daniel took after his grandfather, becoming a teacher in a small town school. Elizabeth, the youngest, stayed close to home, marrying a man from a nearby homestead and settling just a few miles from her parents. Through it all, Teresa and Adam's love only deepened. They'd built a life together from nothing, had weathered storms both literal and figurative, and had raised their family in the mountains Adam loved. Every morning, Teresa woke grateful for the twist of fate that had brought her to Fletcher's mill, to the injustice that had led Adam to step in, to the love that had grown between them. On their 25th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the cabin for a celebration. The cabin had been added onto so many times it was barely recognizable from the simple structure Teresa had first seen, but it was still home. "Tell us the story again," one of the grandchildren begged. "About how Grandpa saved Grandma from the mean Foreman." Teresa and Adam exchanged amused glances. The story had been told so many times it had taken on the quality of legend in their family. "Well," Teresa began, settling into her chair with a grandchild on her lap. "It was a hot day in August, and I just finished a long shift at the lumber mill." She told the story with Adam interjecting details and corrections, and the children listened raptly, even though they'd heard it dozens of times before. Because it was a good story, a true story about injustice and courage and love. When she finished, the youngest grandchild, a boy of 5, looked up at Adam with wide eyes. "You're a hero, Grandpa." Adam laughed and ruffled the boy's hair. "No, son, your grandmother's the hero. She's the one who kept going when things were hard, who stood up for herself even when it was scary. I just made sure she got what she'd earned." "You did more than that," Teresa said softly, meeting his eyes across the room. "You gave me everything." That night, after the celebration had ended and the cabin was quiet again, Teresa and Adam sat on their porch as they had so many nights before. They were older now, Adam's hair more gray than dark, Teresa's hands marked by years of work. But they still sat close, Adam's arm around Teresa's shoulders, both of them content in the silence. "You ever regret it?" Teresa asked quietly. "Giving up your solitary life for all this chaos?" Adam looked at her like she'd asked if the sun might rise in the west. "Regret you? Regret our family? Never, not for 1 second." He pulled her closer. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Teresa Garrett. You and this life we built together." "Even when the children were small and crying all night," Teresa teased. "Even then," Adam said firmly. "Especially then. I love our life, Teresa. Every messy, chaotic, wonderful moment of it." Teresa leaned her head on his shoulder, looking out at the mountains that had become her home. "Me too," she said. "Me too." They sat together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In the cabin behind them, they could hear Elizabeth and her husband preparing for bed in the guest room, could hear the soft breathing of grandchildren asleep in the loft. Their family, their legacy, the life they'd built from nothing. It had all started with an injustice, with stolen wages and a foreman's cruelty. But it had become something beautiful, something lasting. Teresa had learned that sometimes the worst moments could lead to the best things, that kindness and courage could change everything, and that love was worth every risk. She'd been a woman struggling to survive, and Adam had been a mountain man looking for a reason to stay. Together, they'd found something neither had been searching for but both had needed: home. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Adam pressed a kiss to Teresa's temple. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," Teresa replied. "Always have, always will." And sitting there on their porch, surrounded by mountains and family and love, Teresa knew that every hardship she'd faced had been worth it to get to this moment, this life, this man. She'd gotten more than the wages she'd earned. She'd gotten everything her heart had ever wanted, and she was grateful for every single day. The end.